Good evening. This is Lama Tantrapa with this webinar series dedicated to the spiritual dimensions of martial arts. We are with Lama Rangbar tonight, who will be sharing with us the practices and the principles that assist the practitioners of martial arts and energy arts in developing greater sense of energy awareness as well as personal development. He holds the Dudjom Tesar lineage of Vajrayana Buddhism, developing his practice over the past 30 years. Lama teaches on several topics from both his lineages, including Anu Yoga and Great Perfection, Dzogchen teachings. Lama is well known for his integration of these sciences into daily life and for his fresh teaching style, which is well tailored to modern Western audiences, yet solidly based on inherent authenticity of his ancient school. Lama has recently returned to the United States in order to establish one of the most critical monumental peace projects of our time, Mahabodhivastu and the Universal Heart Support Stupa. This project is the culmination of his experiences and pursuits as it relates to enlightenment of all beings. Welcome to our teleseminar, Lama Rangbar. It is fantastic to have you. What is it that you consider the spiritual rather than the physical or energetic dimensions of martial arts, and why would we want to learn that?
Okay, well, it's a very good question, and if you don't mind, I'd like to start by, since what I've learned is nothing that I'm inventing myself, I'd love to give respect to our lineage just by saying a brief prayer for your whole teleseminar program that you're going to be doing, which I think is very wonderful. So if you don't mind, I'd just like to say one quick prayer to usher in that success for that project of yours. Is it okay? Oregon, Yigia, Nujan, San, Pema, Gasara, Dombola, Yansen, Chogi, Odromne, Pema, Jungne, Shesudra, Kordu, Kandro, Mambo, Kor, Kiki, Jesu, Dra, Jiki, Chinjia, Lopsir, Shiksu, So, Guru, Pema, Sidi, Nicho, Dero, Chimbola, Chupjo, Dala, Waji, Korgedan, Jimbajizo, Chodan, Tomongozo, Saldo, So. So, thank you for inviting me. I'm really happy. One of the most important things that you're doing is trying to benefit people. And as such, this is an act of compassion, which is really what martial arts are designed to foster, actually. If you talk about, let's begin with, for example, if you were a kid, like I think I might have said some of these things before in a talk we had previously, but if you are a kid and you walk up to two old men playing chess and you take the place of one of them and you start to throw the pieces around on the board, the other old man will laugh at you and say, well, he's just a little kid, he doesn't know how to play the game of chess. Similarly, we should understand where we stand as human beings on this planet. We should understand the game a little better so that we're not wasting our time. Of course, we have a human birth. We're not, although we might practice white crane style, we're not actually birds. We are humans. So we have to understand the role of a human and what is the meaning of this precious human rebirth. What makes it precious, or what would make it unprecious, not precious. And so the martial arts, if you want to talk about martial arts, then we set the stage of the chessboard for martial arts. And so there's a plate and a fork and a knife, and you know, it comes from a certain history. And if we look back, and I can't say that this is the only martial art or the first martial art, but if we talk about the Shaolin, for example, we're talking about Bodhidharma, who was the fifth patriarch of Buddhism, who was from India and brought meditation systems to China And I think people know this story probably. I don't want to go into too much detail, but essentially, Bodhidharma
I wouldn't assume
was
that
teaching a
people know.
meditation system, and his monks were falling asleep, and they couldn't meditate for long periods of time. And there were also cultural problems of getting robbed on the way to work, so to speak. Or when the monastery had a procession from one place to another, their things would be stolen, they could be beaten up. And there's nothing very enlightened about getting your butt kicked. It's just not necessarily a very productive thing to do. So in his time, and I think this is true in Tibet as well, a lot of the religions, including Christianity, were like fortresses. The castellated, you know, when we see a church, it's castellated. It's made to shoot arrows out of, and people can hold up in a church. Zongs, or what they call fortresses, and they call them gompas nowadays. Meditation places are also called chozong, or dharma fortresses. Right. And so, in the real world, there's a need to recognize we have a precious human rebirth, and there are relative circumstances to contend with. And so there was an idea, well, I'll develop these 18 movement systems to keep my flocks awake, my sheep, my meditators, my monks, and also I could train them to defend themselves. And I think it's an old story. Most martial artists already know this. But Bodhidharma was we say, the name of him in Tibetan is Padampa Sangye. And he lived, evidently, some 400 years. I can't remember. Anyway, it's more than 300 and less than 7. So I think around 400 years old, because the accounts of him run through history. Though it's a Ripley's, believe it or not. But basically, Padampa Sangye held a great tradition of meditation. And there are a lot of stories about his meditative capacities, his ability to walk on water or whatever. But essentially, we are practicing in that tradition of martial arts. And there was something I wanted to say, that we are building on that tradition as time goes by, and it's evolving according to the evolution of humans. It's not separate from this planet. For example, you said to me earlier in private, you said, I love martial arts because you can test out your theories of the universe and see how it works in your system in combat. And if you're wrong, you'll get punched. And if you're not, you might get one over on your opponent. In other words, and what we say in the Tibetan system is, for example, in the words of my teacher, His Holiness Dudum Rinpoche, Shenpen Dawa Rinpoche, His Holiness Shenpen Dawa Rinpoche said, the nerves don't lie. In other words, you can talk about emptiness until you're blue in the face, but if someone pokes you with the pin and you scream bloody murder, it's a sign probably that you don't quite believe in that emptiness. In other words, the pin hurts.
Even if you don't scream, if you just get all frustrated or afraid or even worried that you're going to get poked with a pin or whatever object, these worries and concerns and these fears and the reaction is definitely going to be a pretty clear indication that there is room for improvement.
That's right. And so we are building on this tradition, a healthy tradition, a tradition that's both realistic and progressive to train our energy. And so we say that this has been inherited in a lineage. So even martial arts has a true Buddhist lineage to it. And we can explore those. I'm not an expert in history, but I do know something about my own lineage. For example, we say, and again, I'm quoting someone else here, but I should honor them by telling his name is Henry McCann. He's the president of the New Jersey Acupuncture Society, and he says, we are practicing the living tradition of dead people rather than the dead tradition of living people. And this is very important because what we inherit from our teachers we inherit that, and then we have to make it our own. We have to work it out in our body, speech, and mind. We have to bring our continuum to that transmission we've received, and then we have to try to cultivate it and improve it and understand it and use it in our daily life for effectively helping our society. Our body is a vehicle, and it's a vehicle that pretty much can take you to heaven or can take you to hell. It depends on where you want to navigate.
Well, I personally don't believe in hell and heaven. However, I certainly agree that the body doesn't lie. And also embodying the knowledge is crucial, because we can be very smart and clever with our explanations and theories, but if we don't walk the talk, then obviously theories will just remain theories.
That's right. And when I use the word like heaven and hell, it's metaphorical in a way, but my teacher also used to say, I'd rather live in hell and feel like it's heaven than live in heaven and feel like it's hell. So it's all relative what heaven and hell actually appears to you as. The point is that we have to suffer our own confusion, or we can clarify our own confusion. It's up to us, basically. So,
and how does this pertain to martial arts?
So, getting back to what you're saying then, why would one, and I think the sound wasn't so clear, but you're asking why train in the energetics, or what did you say? Why?
Well, there are different dimensions to martial arts. Some people just simply focus on physical dimensions. So they train to be stronger, physically more capable, perhaps develop greater endurance and precision, coordination, and other qualities like that. Some consider that there are some psychological aspects to martial arts. For example, having greater reflexes, perhaps developing a greater level of fearlessness, or even some strategic and tactical skills. Some people consider that there are some energetic qualities to martial arts, so they learn how to develop the inner chi or inner strength. Perhaps they learn some techniques for projecting chi or dealing with energy projections from other people. And finally, there are also some spiritual dimensions, and that's why we're here tonight, to discuss these spiritual dimensions.
Okay, so I'm going to give a lot of analogies. I think in business, for example, rich people tend to say it's just as easy to make $1 million as it is to make $1. So why not make $1 million? Now, of course, that may be hard for most people to grasp, but what I'm saying is you have to decide what stratum you want to be in. For example, do you want to take on a small project, a large project? The effort might be the same. There's 24 hours in a day. A bigger project, you might have to be a little more alert. There might be more risk. There might be more gain. So in a martial arts situation, we have to decide what is our playing field. And it is a tradition that helps you improve yourself, and not only be able to take care of yourself, but to be able to look at the benefits of others, to look after others. And so when you change your worldview, your playing field changes, then the tools you need change. For example, you and I are using a computer. It's a very powerful tool. We wouldn't be able to do this talk with a lot of people involved necessarily without it.
Right.
So we need this kind of special, powerful tool. So in martial arts, we can have a type of person who wants to feel like Superman, wants to be able to beat up others and feel good about himself, and this is okay. It's a kind of feeling your oats aspect of martial arts, where you feel good about your life, you have a body. Of course, these things are temporary, so we need to do more than just develop our body, which is going to turn into dust anyway. We need to develop our whole continuum. And so, and not only that, even as a martial artist, even if your goal is to enjoy the life of a martial artist and to develop your skills, you want to be the best you can be. You're pursuing excellence, and I think the title of this telecast is The Pursuit of Excellence and the Pursuit of Harmony. And these are the two topics which relate with essentially developing one's basic energy structure and then understanding one's position in the universe. They're two different things, but they're very much related, and our body is the vehicle for that journey. So the martial art is the training system we start out with is a prerequisite. For example, we train muscle and bone and sinew. We train these by the movements. We're training our muscle and bone and our sinew that keep the muscles attached to the bone, ligaments, etc. And then we have the positioning, how we are in relationship to our opponent. Then we have feeling, which has to do with our nerves being developed and becoming accurate enough to sense what the chi impulses of your opponent might be. Okay, so that's feeling. And then the higher science is the timing. So if you think you want to be good at timing, right, then, and timing is a very superior science, very difficult, because time and space collapse, and so that's one of the ultimate aspects. So if you want to be good at timing and you think you can get away without having good muscle and bone and good position and good feeling, if you think you can get away without having those things, it's not very likely.
Right. Working with timing and with the whole dimension of perceiving time is certainly one of the most advanced aspects of martial arts, and I would say that training the preliminary practices is crucial, because if the person doesn't have the foundation, so to speak, they would have really hard time understanding even what is this concept of timing, because they just don't know how to apply this idea of timing, even if they knew how to use the more enlightened perception of the time-space continuum.
Right. If, for example, if we are in there's more to it as well. If you're in a martial arts group and you're learning how to throw people, how to take a throw, how to be thrown, how to take a punch without it clouding you, many things like this, how to absorb shock, and you're trying to make yourself pugilistic, strong and capable, it gives confidence. You feel, I'm gaining confidence, I can move my body, I can take unpleasant circumstances without it really disturbing me, I'm capable. You feel good, and this confidence is extremely valuable, because especially in this modern society, if you don't have a measure of confidence, you're in big trouble. So the confidence gained in the simplistic way of engaging in sparring and these kind of things, getting better every day, one day finding able to throw your teacher or whatever it is that might happen, you also have to realize that you need to understand your vulnerabilities, because the vulnerabilities are also the place. For example, we had there were times, even myself, where I had a student and I didn't want to give him certain types of sciences, we call it. In Indonesia, we refer to the movements as sciences, different movements. There are certain things I did not want to train some of my students, or certain things my teacher didn't want to train some students, because it would make them too invincible, and then they wouldn't really learn. Their personalities wouldn't be able to evolve, because there would just be no way to take the person down. And you can build a Sherman tank out of a student. You can build a round, impervious iron ball of chi out of your students, but it will not necessarily help him or her to graduate into a more universal path. And so it's very important the aspect of vulnerability in martial arts, to know your limitations. As Clint Eastwood said, someone drove away, as the criminal drove away with the bomb in his car, and I think his wife said, "Why did you let him get away?" And he lit a cigar and said, "Well, a man has just got to know his limitations." Now, he might have been talking about himself, but of course the car exploded and his enemy, he was talking about his enemy. But, you also have to know your own limitations. And this is very important. You have to be humble. We're not going to become, superhero, invincible gods, because our body will perish, and then we're just what we call an old man or rotting dust. We have to be humble. So this is the harmony aspect. So, but anyway, it's important to understand also, if you think of, for example, a singer, as someone who's an opera singer, they want to do exercises that make it so that they're not just singing out of their throat or out of their cheeks or something. They want to come from their entire being, not only their abdomen, but they want to come from their full spectrum of emotions. So that makes them a better singer, more believable, more communicative of what they're trying to say. And so martial artists, when you engage your opponent, the greatest martial artist is not necessarily someone who knocks out someone in a single blow. It's very important to understand there's a difference between fighting and killing. When you learn how to kill, it is a discussion of decision. When you learn how to fight, it is a discussion of dialogue. And when we brothers and sisters do martial arts together, we're not trying to kill each other. We have to first learn how to have a dialogue.
And it's important to also recognize that there are certain reasons why we study martial arts. There are certain objectives that we aspire to achieve, and there are certain values that we would like to uphold through our practice. And I would say that this also eventually boils down to recognizing what your core values are, including perhaps even discovering your mission or your purpose of life. So what would you say about that? If the meaning of life, or if the purpose would become clear through this study of martial arts, what would be the steps or the path that would lead to it?
Well, like I said, we call this the pursuit of excellence and the pursuit of harmony. And the ideal martial artist is going to destroy his enemy by not having any enemies, by making everybody friends, right? And we're going to get to that a little later on.
Right. We'll have a special seminar dedicated to it.
So, first of all, it's a progression. Even when we say martial arts, we're talking about a system. If we didn't have language or whatever, we'd just be human beings on the earth. Some people would be moving around like martial artists. Some people would be moving around like ballerinas. Who knows?
Right.
But the point is, when we say martial arts, a number of types of systems come to our mind. Those systems were derived from people who had different motivations. So I don't believe all martial arts will lead you to enlightenment, for example. However, they will, many of them will enable you to cultivate excellence, the pursuit of excellence, for quite some time. And when I say the pursuit of excellence, I think it's important for me to use some martial art terms here. I think in English, I want to be excellent. I'd like to be better tomorrow than I am today. I'm sloppy today. I recognize the value of this life. I want to make something of myself. What would that be? If today I can handle one opponent, I'd like to be able to handle 3. I always want to be on the cutting edge. So we have a notion that there's a game to play, and we are a player in the game. It's a little bit dualistic, and we're going to Exercise. We're going to heat up our body. We're going to get better and better. I can run 3 miles today and 4 miles tomorrow. The pursuit of excellence. This is a yang pursuit. For men, in the younger stages of their life, they're exercising yang. Their body is exercising movement and power and impulse. It's a creative impulse. It's called, heaven, you could say, in the I Ching. So you want to exercise that. We're exercising the yang, and we're cultivating the yin. The yin is being cultivated at that time. As we grow up, we're not so interested in beating people up, actually, or being the best. There's always another better Muhammad Ali out there somewhere. So we're more interested in how we harmonize with things. So we start to exercise our yin and cultivate our yang. And this happens somewhere in the midlife, about halfway, I don't know. But for a woman, it's different. And a woman, and that's why in our system, for example, we have women's moves, because a woman is exercising her yin in her young years. She needs to be attractive. She needs to use a female power, or more the negative power, to be able to facilitate things to happen in her world the way she needs them to happen. She's not bombastic when she's young. She wants to test her powers of seduction, for example. She wants to know how she should look, what she should do in order to get the situation to cooperate without her using brute strength, which she may not have. And as she gets older, she starts to realize, I have an inner power, because she's been cultivating yang all her life, right? She's been exercising yin and cultivating yang. And as she gets to an older stage, she starts to become able to use the core yang energy in a very sophisticated way, which is actually more yang than a man will ever be. So, because it's been cultivated for so long. And this is a kind of long discussion, but what I'm talking about now is the difference in how excellence and harmony is pursued by men and women, and in which way. So, a man is pursuing excellence and eventually crosses over to wanting to, I would like to use less strength in my martial arts. If I'm going to handle 10 people without getting exhausted, I'm going to have to conserve my energy and use their energy and not be afraid of it, and not really be judgmental about it. So you see, that's a development, right? And that is a basically your worldview of what you're trying to do really influences how your martial arts is going to be. We used to have a lot of people in our school that they wanted to fight, they wanted to see who's better, and that's the name of the game, okay. But the teachers, I had 5 personal teachers. I used to have to get beaten up 5 times a day in 5 different styles. And they had different ways of training me, different personalities. And it was the biggest lesson I got, to be able to be vulnerable, to understand the vulnerability, because the higher movements which were really the most effective, or the most brave, the most open-handed, the most fluid, the most honest, courageous, those movements were based on compassion. And we even have a movement in our system called the Thousand-Hand Kuan Yin, or the Avalokitesvara. It's a bodhisattva movement because of that. So why don't you, maybe you can comment now a little bit. So
the movements that you're talking about, based on compassion, from my perspective, and I have probably just as much training in martial arts as you do, maybe a little bit less, but
maybe more.
I practice and teach how to recognize the edges of the comfort zone and help people to reach those edges without pushing themselves over the edge. What it means is that even if we bring ourselves to our own edge, we can actually do that so that we would experience the flow. We would experience peak performance. We would experience what it's like to discover how we can expand our parameters of who we think we are. Because once you get to the edge of the comfort zone, you really feel that just a little further beyond that, and you'll be uncomfortable or you'll be in pain. But on the edge, there is this fine balance between comfort and discomfort. And that's exactly where peak performance happens. Because you're not too complacent, you're not too comfortable, and at the same time, you're not overwhelmed with pain and discomfort. So there is this sweet spot where the peak performance, where the flow occurs. And that's where we learn how to feel our own flow. But we can also facilitate the flow for other people. With their permission, verbal or nonverbal, we can help them discover where their edges of their comfort zone are. And especially if they're asking for it. If somebody, for example, tries to attack me, or in the context of the practice of martial arts, essentially the person is asking for a lesson from me. So I say verbally or non-verbally, oh, you want a lesson? Okay, well, here it comes. I'm taking you to the edge of your comfort zone, not by force, but by exaggerating what you are already doing. And usually when the person does something, in a martial arts context, for example, they expect to run into an obstacle. And if there is no obstacle, if instead of a hard object, they realize that there is no hard object, and they go further than they anticipated, inevitably they reach the edge of their comfort zone. And then I don't push them over the edge. In other words, I exercise compassion, and I just let them see, okay, you feel this? You're on the edge of your comfort zone. I can easily take you beyond this edge and you will be in pain. Now, I'm going to let you go, or I'm going to let you experience your flow, but this is a lesson. So pay attention here. And if you don't pay attention, if you start getting defensive or resistant, well, then you are either going to take yourself over the edge. So I'm not taking responsibility for that. You are doing it to yourself. But at the same time, also, I give you a choice whether to relax standing or on the ground. So if you choose to relax standing, it means that you relaxed right on the spot, and the relaxed person cannot be aggressive. So I'm actually facilitating peaceful resolution of the conflict by helping you achieve the state of relaxation in which you cannot pursue the conflict any longer. Right. Or if you don't relax standing in time, then you end up going on the ground, and perhaps you will relax on the ground with my help.
I think you're saying very clearly. It's wonderful way of illustrating something. You're talking about a dance between the student and the teacher, which is very important. It's in martial arts. That's how the lineage is transmitted. Of course, we're doing our own movements, and then we apply them together. I lost you there. I wonder if you're going to come back. Or...
Yes, I will come back. I'm just turning my camera off, and we'll turn it on in just a moment.
Okay. So this notion of, for example, how many hours we spend sparring with our teacher is very much a kind of indication of the kindness of the lineage. So, for example, they spent many hours, like you said, bringing someone into a self-recognition, into recognizing what they could do, how they are behaving, and in the true sense of the Shaolin Temple, I think, the point was to mirror, to become a mirror, an exercising mirror, the surface of the mirror, an exercising surface of the mirror, so that the student could eventually gain self-reflection and self-cultivation without so much external paraphernalia like having someone to spar with. Although I think in the old Chinese movies they're always looking for someone to spar with check them out, you know, and it's a game in the movies.
Well,
But
and perhaps the sparring is not only the test of another person. I would say first and foremost, it's how martial artists test themselves, their prowess, their skillfulness, their technique, as well as their energy and their awareness. So sparring is not sometimes, well, at the decent level of development of a martial artist, the sparring shifts from an effort to test the other person towards the effort of testing and understanding ourselves.
of course, and so what I'm getting at here is that the martial arts were in their history, and I go back to this again. You have to look at why they're martial arts. Of course, yeah, we want to defend the town, defend ourselves, defend the town, etc. But defend our Buddhism, maybe. But the point is that when the Shaolin Temple was training somebody, putting them through all that love, actually there's a lot of love in the training system there. And when they're putting someone through that process, there are some winners, some people that come out to be a sage, a saint, or someone who recognize the reflectivity comes to the point of recognizing one's own mind, what it is and what is nature. So we're going to get into that in a little bit in the later episodes here, I guess. But the point is that it's a transmission, it's a lineage transmission system for enlightenment. That's what it's supposed to be. That's what it's. Now it has, like many things, many branches of martial arts and many branches of spirituality, for that matter, religion, have degenerated. And some are used only for money or what have you, and the main point is lost. And we also have to look at our circumstance. And this is something I want to bring up. This is very important here. Like I said, we don't want to be the little kid who comes to the chessboard and starts to throw the pieces around. It's laughable. We need to know where we stand. So even a martial arts system, I mean, if we're really hell-bent on killing someone, you buy a gun. It's not a question of training yourself to kill people like that. I mean, very few people have that kind of profession where they use their martial arts to kill people.
I'm sure NRA advocates would probably say, no, we're not buying guns to kill people. We're buying guns to just scare them away.
Or make peace. Well, whatever. The point I'm making is that, for example, we have to be careful that our systems don't become antiquated. And here I have to apologize ahead of time, because I'm going to mention the name of a system that I don't know very much about, but I know a little bit about. So, for example, and I'm using it, and so I'm sorry if someone's from this system and takes offense. I don't mean it. It's more of an example. So there's something called the iron shirt technique, for example. And my teacher was sitting somewhere, and a young woman came in and started to talk with him, and she was quite pleased with her martial arts. She was getting very tough, and she also had a kind of ego. And she said, he said, what are you studying? And she said, well, I'm studying the iron shirt technique. And he just shook his head and put his head in his hand and said, oh my God. Now, he may have done that to kind of knock her down a little bit, but later I asked him, what's wrong with that? And he said, she's a beautiful lady. That's a system that was designed to make one impervious to different types of weapons originally. That was the original purpose. It may have some ancillary benefits, but for a woman to practice that, it's going to make her whole chi layer very, she's going to have a subcutaneous hard layer of chi, and that's not good for the woman's system really at that age. So it's better, if she really wants to practice iron shirt, she should buy a Kevlar vest.
Well, we don't really know what's good and what's not good for a woman or for anybody to that matter. So I would say it would be probably most intelligent to ask her, so how is it working out for you?
my point is this. I'm not trying to focus on let me get past the analogy now. That was just the analogy, okay? The point is that the system would change. The meaning of a system also has relevance to the times we live in. And so right now, martial artists are practicing not really because they expect that every time they walk down the street they're going to have to use their martial arts per se. They're doing it as a way of cultivating energy flow, health benefits, mental benefits, confidence building, and an understanding of, like you said, the cutting edge of challenging oneself, not blaming others for being miserable, pushing the edge to understand that you have to be a little uncomfortable.
Well, I would have to say that the main reason why we learn how to get to the edge and how to expand our comfort zone is because most of our dreams and aspirations reside beyond the edges of our comfort zones. We would have been living our dreams a long time ago if they were within our reach. The same applies to our potential. By definition, potential hasn't been actualized yet. Why has it not been actualized? Because we haven't been able to get a hold of it. The reason why is because it's outside of our comfort zone. Now, how do we get to our potential? How do we get to our dreams and aspirations so that we can live them? We learn how to expand our comfort zone so it embraces or it covers those areas of our being that used to be unavailable or dormant previously. And so that's essentially why I would say we pursue the expansion of our comfort zone and learn how to spend some time on edge. And the more time we spend on edge, the more comfortable we get there. So by definition, the edge then starts expanding.
I think that's well said, and I think you're touching on a new topic, which is one I wanted to get to. You said it in a slightly different way, but we have similar views on this. You said, well, it would be good to ask that lady, well, how is this for you? Now, there's two problems going on. One is that, you know, there is a very big importance to have a lineage transmission because there are just too many mistaken paths you can go on. You can spend your whole life. I think the phrase my guru used, my teacher, my martial art teacher, Suhu, said to me was, I would rather have a guru and gain the experience, because to have a guru and gain the experience does not equal suffering because the guru is good, rather than to gain the experience and be a guru, which equals suffering. Okay, the reason is because we have a lineage that we're taking on where many, many generations of understanding and cultivation have been passed and developed and passed from the master to the teacher, and it's like a whole treasure trove. So we want to ask, here's the problem, okay, we want to ask that girl, let's say, who's practicing Iron Share, how is it for you? But her answer, and not because she's female, let's just say she's male, the answer of this person would be, you know, they might have some self-knowledge and they might not. They might say, I love it. I am now impervious to your slicing sword. But the point...
The question is, what are her values? Because
right,
we are not in the business of telling people what's right and what's wrong. We are in the business of supporting people in manifesting their dreams and living their lives in a more awake and a more enlightened way.
What I'm saying here is that what point I was arriving at, I take a while to arrive at my points. I have to get people on a train. I have to pull into a station, you know, eventually. So what I'm getting at is that when I said our views were the same, very similar, the point is that in this world of spirituality or what have you, there's no supremacy given by God, let's say. I mean, you can use the word God or the universe or whatever. There's no supremacy to, like I said, heaven or hell. Like whether you want to, it's whatever you like. And so, as a teacher, and yet, If you value yourself as a teacher and you want to help a person through their discovery process, that's fine. But suppose they want to be a mass murderer. How do you feel about having brought them all the way to be an excellent mass murderer? Now, what I'm saying here is that
they will be creating a certain karmic experience. I don't have judgments in my point of view or in my worldview as to good or bad, or right and wrong, evil and good, or whatever. Because what's good for one person may not be good for another person, and what's evil to one person is not so evil to another person.
Fair enough. We're not yet on separate pages.
Right.
I think what I mean to say is that eventually, if you're training someone properly, and you're bringing them to some self-recognition, that's probably not the outcome. And the outcome is probably not that they would just simply enjoy killing people. In other words, there's a certain similar outcome to people who train properly. They become self-knowing, self-knowledgeable, and so they would become, I think, by nature, less dualistic, less violent. I think that's
It's a matter of recognizing that suffering is necessary. And I've never heard of anybody who would experience enlightenment without having gone through a significant amount of suffering. So, in other words, suffering is not a bad thing that we need to avoid by all means. And causing suffering is not a problem in itself. Not learning the lessons from suffering becomes a challenge, because then the person just gets stuck in perpetuating this vicious cycle of suffering. And what I would encourage the person to do if they were to talk to me, for example, and I would discover that they're practicing iron short or whatever they practice, I would ask them, how is it working out for you? And how well is it supporting the manifestation of your dreams? How well is it upholding your values? Because if the values of the person are being upheld, if their needs and their dreams are being manifested, then they are on a path that is very satisfactory to me. Right. And me telling them, oh, you're doing it wrong and you should do that instead, would be very presumptuous and outright judgmental, self-righteous.
Right. Yes.
So from that point of view, how do you practice and teach the transition from pursuing the excellence for one's own sake to pursuing harmony?
Well, first of all, like I said, it is also partially, or to some extent, regulated either by one's age, one's experience in this life, and also one's evolutionary propensity. So I think people come into this world, you could have 5 babies and they're just not all the same, even though same husband and same wife, all the kids are different. And so you have this natural propensity, karmic propensity, trajectory of the soul, let's say. When I use these words, I don't want to get into debates of whether the soul exists or not. I'm just talking poetically. Okay?
Right. The Buddhists would probably say, "Wait a moment."
Yeah. So when we let me use my whatever freaky language I want to use, but the kid comes into the world with some evolution behind him. Let's say some propensity. He might be a natural saxophone player. He might play the saxophone and become great, and he might think he's so great because he, point is, he will have some traits. And then you have you have also a situation where you have a lot of energy when you're young, and then as you gain satisfaction, maybe you make $1 million very fast, you start to, maybe you're a martial artist, you fight a lot, you win a lot of battles, maybe you win a lot of financial battles, maybe you have a big house and a mansion and a bigger one and then 2 mansions, and eventually you ask yourself, well, I have all these mansions, now all there is to do is to die in this mansion, or to figure out a way to give away my wealth.
How about enjoying living in those mansions.
Well, you might have enjoyed building all the mansions, and but after a while you have to whatever it is. I mean, the point is that you asked me, what is this transition?
Mm-hmm.
And the transition, like you said, it's very important. You said, we can't say when that time bomb will go off. In Tibetan Buddhism, for example, one would try to give chances from very early on for a person to recognize their impermanence. That they want to say, this is not the only life you're going to have, and well, even if it is, whatever, it's not permanent. And so, will that change your view? So they give ample opportunity to changing the playing field, the rules of the chess game, if you will.
Okay.
Rather than letting it take too long, because the samsara, or the confused existence of chasing your own shadows, maybe loving the world, really enjoying it. It's important to enjoy life. In fact, one time we finally got to the point of asking my teacher, well, what's the point of life? And he said, to enjoy it. But at the same time, one has to understand that we hope, I mean, like I said, there's no supremacy. The bad news is this: Houston, we have a problem. There's no supremacy whatever direction one wants to go in. We can't say this is good, this is bad. So this time period of changing from a pursuit of excellence to a pursuit of harmony is largely very much a personal decision. If you try to force someone to pursue harmony when they're really thinking they want a girlfriend or a boyfriend, you're fighting City Hall. You're going against the grain in a way. So that's why that comes later. By the way, I said in a later seminar we're going to talk about movements as a medicine. So you're going to hear something about how we would train in our lineage, for example. I don't know if I want to let the cat out of the bag now. It's supposed to be in a later section, but I can touch upon it.
Well, you can at least tease us today with what is it that we are going to be learning in the next few teleseminars with you.
Well, since it's, in a sense, we're not. I won't be able to teach someone the Drunken God movement over this telecast, and so we're only going to touch on the theory about it, actually. But by and large, the different movements have, briefly speaking, they have different curative powers, and there are some times when I wanted to give a certain movement to someone, and my teacher said, "No, don't give him that. No, give him this," and I would learn slowly how he would choose these remedies, and why. Mm. And so, and I think it's not that much of a different discussion from what you were saying about bringing people to their comfort zone, to the edge of their comfort zone. I don't think it's much different, but they have implications as far as the personality type and what phenomena they're going to experience in their life, and that's very beautiful. In other words, you have a computer, you run many different kind of programs, and you're going to experience an environment that's different according to each of the programs. The human is an advanced kind of computer. It's not that hard to put in a few energetic programming features that bloom in the student's mind, So this is also a skill the teacher has to learn, I think.
Right. So as you are in the position of the teacher now for all of us, will you share with us a little bit about what is it that we will be learning in the next few seminars with you?
Okay. Well, I hope we've crossed a lot of terrain here in a kind of a nutshell way. In a nutshell, we've covered a bunch of things. I hope I won't bore people in the subsequent ones, but basically, I want to start to cover ground about I would say I want to slowly traverse from the hard physical martial arts way of seeing things to a highly distilled way of seeing the body as an instrument and how it's cultivated and what's going to happen in meditation. And so, and then we can talk a little bit about how that reverts back to our nervous system again, in other words, back to the physical world. So I hope to take us on that journey a little bit, and if possible, to also, as we're going down that highway, to point out some of the signposts. Okay, now when we're here, we're talking about that system, and when we're here, the name of that system is this, or, to give people a little bit of a roadmap, because I think people do practice martial arts and meditation, and there are a lot of types of meditation, so I want to try to, as best I can in such a short series, to give people a way to understand, okay, when I do martial art, it's this. When I do meditation, this is happening, and how that would affect their martial arts, and how that relates to their daily life, how they want to conduct their life, how they might want to think about practice in daily life and the purpose of the human life, for example.
So, how do we discover the purpose of human life? Will you walk us through this exploration in our next few seminars?
Of course, if someone comes to a Lama and says, what's the purpose of my life, it would be a very strange Lama to say, on occasion we say something, but most of the time the best answer would be, how the hell should I know what the purpose of your life is? But
there is a very simple and elegant way to answer this question in a much more helpful manner, and that is by simply inquiring about the student's value system. Again, not everybody is even familiar with values, and then most of the values that most people adhere to are not their own values. They're the values that they receive from their parents, their schooling, their upbringing, their religion, and whatnot. So reevaluating the values perhaps would give them a much clearer understanding of what is essential to them. And then categorizing these values in such a way that they really prioritize the most important values, and then, so that they can pursue them. And then the pursuit of these values, or we can call them dreams, and really living these dreams would...
Well, I think I was going to go on to say,
purpose of life, as far as I'm concerned.
You kind of tripped me up in the middle from going from one to the other, so I didn't want to, to override you there, but I'm being a little facetious. So we say, on the one hand, you have to give breath to the fact that they have their own purpose, and then sometimes, so you asked me, how could you bring someone to the purpose? So you were the one who asked me. I didn't ask you. So
I asked you, how do you pursue your own purpose? In other words, hopefully we will be able to learn on your example.
So for example, if there are many people watching the show, for example, so if there's 55 or 5,500, whatever, each will have some kind of different path, but essentially it's very mystical what someone's purpose in life is. It's a very funny word as well. We have to fulfill the process of becoming, and then we also have to, I'm being romantic here, but we have what we call in the Tibetan system Kerim and Zogrim, and the Kerim is the generation stage of the deities and whatnot, mantra and different kind of mantras and visualizations, and Zogrim is the dissolution stage or the perfection stage, completion stage. So the purpose of these is to eventually come to realize what is the nature of reality clearly. Now in martial arts, again, and I think it's good you brought this up, because I think it's very important that, and it is, let's say this, when we give certain types of teachings, we make a caveat or request of the students. And I think it's important I do this. I would have liked to start with this, but we're getting there, so it's good. The the thing is that when we receive these kind of transmissions or discussions of the lineage, it's important for me to state that, again, bodhicitta, or the compassionate mind of enlightenment, the altruistic mind that cares for others, that wants to benefit others, that wants to help others, like a parent caring for their children. And that bodhisattva mind, whether it be on a relative level or an absolute level, is an important mindset to engender when receiving some teachings of Buddhism, for example. And if you have compassion, it doesn't matter what religion you are in or whatever system you're doing. If you have compassion and you engender compassion and develop compassion, you're going to have good results that don't equate much with suffering. I'm not saying you won't suffer on the way. You have to suffer. That's true what you said. But if you don't have bodhicitta, if you don't have compassion, it still doesn't matter what religion you're in. You won't have a good time. You'll be experiencing a different type of suffering, compounded suffering. And so suffering that grows and increases and gets you more confused. So
can you explain a little bit, just briefly in the last few minutes of our seminar tonight, what is the connection between bodhicitta, or as you call it, compassion for some reason, on one hand, and the amount of suffering that one experiences on the other hand?
Okay, very good. Well, largely it's a question of having an open mind, really. If you don't have compassion towards yourself, towards others, you tend to brace up, and you tend to become tight. You're saying, I don't like that experience, and I like this experience. I'll chase these experiences that I like, and the ones that are hurting me, I'm going to try to get rid of them. It's probably going to make more desire, less fulfillment in your chase. You won't get what you want, and more of getting what you don't want.
Or you may get what you wanted, but may not have your needs met.
Be careful what you wish for.
Their desires and things that they want, but don't pay attention to what they really need, often end up not getting their needs met. And
that's
at the
right.
same time, what they wanted or desired, still not quite satisfactory, because the grass is always greener on the other side, so to speak. So
there's a very
you get what you wanted and still wonder, well, why am I not happy?
There's a very funny story I have to tell. The Lama who recognized me as a reincarnation of such and such, I brought him to my to my house to visit my mom, my mother, and he's from the wild east. So it's a very rough terrain. I mean, he's a Lama, but they're tough, you know. It's cowboy tough. And he sat down, and he's very, very formal, and it's like having a rock, a big boulder, sit in one of the table, at your chair. And my mom's an academic person, and he's an academic. I mean, he's a scholar, right? He's also a scholar. He's a Lama. He's an educated person for his world, very well trained, highly trained. And she said to him, "So, how does Rinpoche like America?" And then I translated, and he said, "It's okay." And then she said, "Well, what does," I probably asked the wrong question, "what does he think are the differences between America and Tibet?" I translated, and he said, "Nothing." And I said, and she said, "What's wrong with him?" She didn't say it, but she gave me the expression, she's my mom, I know what she's thinking. "What's wrong with this guy? Why did he say that?" And then I asked him, and he said, "Well, wherever I go, I find people who are chasing happiness and don't have any idea how to make themselves happy, and they're trying to avoid suffering, and they're experts at making suffering for themselves. I see that in Tibet, and I see it over here. What's the difference?" I translated that, and my mom said, your friend is a terrible reductionist. Someone who boils everything down to this small point. But
yeah, he simplified the entire issue of the social anthropology or cultural anthropology to just these two simple points.
Everything went out the window. And in other words, so we get back to what you just said, and that is that I'm echoing what you're saying, and that is that people really are not very sure of what's going to make them happy. I got happy by getting beaten up by 5 masters every day for a long time. In other words, I'm not a masochist, but what happened was
a glutton for punishment anyway.
I started to become happy to be on this planet and understand what was in front of me, that I had a challenge, and I had someone who would challenge me, and I could develop myself, and I could eventually make them stop in their tracks from my training and say, oh, okay, you got that, okay. So I became, and in particular, this notion of discomfort, pushing the edge and not being comfortable, always being slightly on the edge when I said to my teacher one day, God, it seems when I do my practice, I'm running away from my chores, and when I do my chores, I'm running away from my practice. And he said, "Oh, you got it. It means that there's this this ego kind of trying to evade suchness, something like that."
Yeah. Well, who is keeping you on the edge of your seat, so to speak, at this point in time?
Oh, God.
Well,
the project, I thank you. You always give me a good opportunity, Lama Tantrapa. You give me good opportunities. I came to America to build a stupa, which is my expression of a universal bodhicitta, a way of communicating something to the world about peace, inner peace, and about how people can cultivate themselves and how we can learn to be brothers and sisters with each other in a peaceful way, to undo a violent mind. And so trust me, the project is very big. My flaws and faults, all of them are very amplified for myself and others, I think. And so, unfortunately, in fact, one day I went to my teacher. He's passed away now. One of them was named Lama Kunzang Dorje, and I went to him and I begged for some teachings. And he said to me, "Well, now you learned everything now. It's just a question of your practice. I've transmitted everything, and you're practicing well. You know it. You're kind of there." And I said, "Oh no, please don't say that to me. That's very upsetting. You must be very displeased with me to say such a thing like that." I became despondent because it means that, on the one hand, maybe I'm too arrogant to teach. Maybe the karma for him to show his love that way to me was done, and I felt very in danger. Because, and so nowadays I just have, for example, if I say I have an enemy, I don't feel I have any, but people who cause me discomfort are good teachers. 6 situations which, you don't believe me, you don't need a sparring partner to get your butt kicked. Life circumstances do it nicely. For ants, when I was a kid, I used to turn on the garden hose, and I flooded the ant colony. A lot of natural disasters happening nowadays. We're financial tension, maybe. So many things. If you don't feel those things, those are my teachers right now, unfortunately. I would love to have, and once in a while I do have, of course, my teachers very sparingly. They treat me with great respect, unfortunately. I mean to say, they you're a grown man, so therefore, don't wet your bed, they wouldn't. There are certain things they wouldn't want to bother saying to me. So it's they may say something in a very subtle way, and I have to pick that. That's a big of the piece of the mirror that they're going to give me. They're not going to be very. These days, I have to really listen very closely to my teachers.
Forthcoming with new teachings for you, huh?
What's that?
They're not forthcoming with their new teachings.
They may give some techniques and this and that, but it wasn't like my young time when they would, in the martial arts especially, when they really slap you up or really show you. For example, this is a nice martial arts story. I was studying the a lot of white crane movement. That happened to be one of my body type was well suited for the crane. And
you must have been skinny back then, huh?
I was skinny. Yeah, I was skinny, very skinny. Now I'm fat. So I would I was sparring with Suhu's son, and I really wanted to just try to lay him down. Really try to. I just wanted to try it out, and see what would happen. And it's important, to know certain signals in martial arts when you've been had. When you're getting punched, you should know it. But somehow I advanced at a moment when he was already just extending. His body was moving back and his hand was moving forward.
So there is no power in the punch like that.
You would think so. But in that particular circumstance, I was rushing him, and it hit my nose in such a way that it was so painful. And he said, I always see the crane fishing for a fish, but I never saw the fish looking for a crane like that.
That's good. Very good.
So those are the situations where, for example, people like to cheat. I know that sounds funny, but sometimes they like to steal, sometimes they like to cheat. Sometimes they're timid, sometimes they're too aggressive. So these things come out in the sparring, and you can't get away from it if you're going to try something like, I'm going to try this, maybe I'll be it. Of course, you're thinking, I'm going to preserve myself and I'm going to get the better of my opponent, something. If it has that dualistic flavor to it, you're going to experience the edge of your dualism. It's going to hurt.
Yes, the funniest thing is to see somebody who is in a martial arts situation or context who's trying to be somebody who he or she is not, because that becomes very apparent very quickly. Somebody who is timid by nature, trying to be fearless, it becomes really obvious that he is bluffing. If somebody who is slow in his or her responses and trying to be fast, that becomes very obvious as well, and so on. So to wrap up our seminar today, can you give us one reason why we and all the other viewers should attend all the other seminars that you will be presenting in the following few weeks?
Okay. When people come together to explore, in general, I'll give you two reasons, one in general and one in specific. Generally, it's very meritorious, it's very good when brothers and sisters come together to learn from each other. And this is a nice platform. I think you've developed something really beautiful. I hope it increases, and my hat's off to you. It's a great thing. It's later in the next series we could have people ask their questions more. We'll have the system developed for that, so there's interaction from the audience, which is going to be exciting. And I think so the brotherhood and sisterhood of sharing and learning together is very enjoyable, and in America it's very needed for people to come together. We may not be able to drive a few hours to go to a seminar, but we can do it this way. That's one reason. It's a it could be very rich. That's the general. Now, in specific, if I say too much, I'm tooting my own horn. But at the same time, I hope to be able to help people in whatever practice they're doing to give them a new dimension of the human continuum, what that is, what it could be. And I'm bringing us up through those levels until we come to a discussion of the quantum changes that happen on a molecular level, on a DNA level. And that's a long distance to travel from, fighting and getting spanked and these kind of things to that discussion. And I want to try to give people a little bit of a taste of the roadmap so that they can become aware on how to improve their practice or their meditation and get a sense of how these things line up in terms of systems, in a staged manner. That's my goal, and so I think for those people who would like to get a sense of that roadmap so that they can see where the pieces are along the way, I think it would be very beneficial for them. That's my my feeling about why they should attend, what would likely be in it for them. And I hope to eventually bring them to a path of action. For example, I'm also selfish, but in a funny way. I want to bring people to a path of action of social responsibility, how to take care of our planet together. And so I want to guide us to that. So I want the listeners to become able to take care of many people on the planet as best as possible. So that's my wish.
Wonderful. Fantastic. Well, I want to thank you so much, Lamela, for sharing with us today and for introducing some of these important topics. And I think they're important not only for martial artists, but for every human being. So once again, I invite all our viewers and listeners to join us for this series of teleseminars or webinars, whichever you call it, that we will be organizing in the next few weeks. They will be on the same Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 6 p.m. Pacific Time, or whatever time zone you are in. And to register for those events, we will send you an invitation by email. If you have not registered for this particular event, then go to Lama Rangbar at eventbrite.com and register now. And Lama Rangbar is spelled LAMARANGBAR .eventbrite.com, which is spelled EVENTBRITE.com. And if you want to register right now, then we will also give you a special gift. So please go to lamarangbar.eventbrite.com, and I look forward to seeing you next week on Wednesday and for several weeks after that.
Also, may I make a small request, and that is that if people want to see about the Great Mandala for World Peace project, they could go to Mandala for World Peace, MANDALA, Mandala for World Peace, all one word, .org, or they can go to www.bodhivastu, BODHIVASTU.org. I think the second one has a lot more information, bodhivastu.org, and that would give you an idea of the project we're doing, the World Peace Monument, which I hope everybody joins into. We need help to make it manifest, so that's my request.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, Well, I want to thank you once again, Lama Rangbar, for sharing with us tonight, and I look forward to seeing you all next week on Wednesday. Until then, have a wonderful time.
Thank you so much. Very nice.
Namaste.